What is going on, Nuggets Nation and NBA fans? My name is Tom Leuthner. Welcome back into Nuggets Today. We have a few topics to get to here. The first topic being Denver may only make a few moves. There's probably going to be a quick offseason here. Now, it might not start quick, but it's definitely going to end quick. Denver has 3 spots to fill on the roster. Now, with their cap space, that's going to be a little tough to do. There's not much money that you have. Dario already picked up his option. DeAndre Jordan is one of those names out there that Denver may re-sign, which would leave Denver with 2 roster spots. Denver already released 2 guys, 2 of the younger players, who could have made a difference arguably if you decided to try to develop them and play them. But I think that proves that Denver's going in the direction of letting Jokic get the guys he wants and play with guys who are going to help them win a championship rather than develop. Now, I'm not too mad at that. Like we said, obviously I covered it a little bit yesterday. Trey Alexander's gone. I'm going to get to that today because I want to break it down a little bit more. And Denver officially got rid of another player who I'm going to cover in a little while as well. So I'm not going to spoil that yet. But like I said, I don't think Denver will make a trade in the offseason. I think that we will see most likely free agent signings. One of those may be DeAndre Jordan, which I do hope not. Not that I don't like DeAndre Jordan, but I don't think Denver should waste a minimum contract on him. I think there are other people out there, and that's something that we're going to get to in a little bit, but I think there are other players out there. One of those guys I pray is Russell Westbrook. If you're able to restructure that deal, maybe give him the vet minimum now that is more than what his player option would have been last year, and you bring him back. I know that the Kings are targeting him, so that's going to be something to cover because right now Denver is lacking a backup point guard, and like I said, that's the next topic I'm hopping into here, and that is Trey Alexander. Now, they picked up a couple guys. They picked up Tamar Bates, who I think is going to be what looks like the backup point guard right now. I know that obviously Denver has Pickett on the roster. Maybe they look at a guy in free agency. There are some names out there that I've seen in the mix that Denver may target. And it's interesting to me that they released Trey Alexander. Tenzer and Wallace both worked hand in hand with the G League, but you would think that they see some kind of potential realistically in Trey, right? This guy was a G League Rookie of the Year. He was all G League third team. He's a guy that can score the ball at 6'4", the point guard position. Now, I've had my conversations with people in the community. I'm in some group chats. I really do appreciate the group chat. We all, bicker, talk, have our conversations. And I got into a conversation about the height difference, which Trey Alexander 6'4", Jalen Pickett 6'2". Now, I know that people are saying that we've seen the Trey Alexander minutes, but we didn't see him average 13 minutes like Jalen Pickett did. Now, am I saying that Jalen Pickett's not good? I don't think that he is. I don't think that he's NBA ready, especially on a roster like Denver. Maybe if he's on a roster like the Wizards where he gets an opportunity and actually gets to go out and play, he might be ready. But I don't think he's ready to play on a team like Denver where they're going to make deep pushes because you could see it in that Thunder series in those in the few minutes that he got. He looked a little nervous. Not that he didn't do well, but you can't afford to look nervous in those moments. Now, am I saying that Trey wouldn't if he got those opportunities? I don't know. Trey wasn't getting the opportunities during the season. Like I said, you look at what he did in the G League. He shot 43% from 3 on 7 attempts. He's putting up 6 rebounds, 6 assists. He's a point guard, 6'4". I know it's the G League, but there are some G Leaguers that make it to the NBA that are pretty good. I mean, like I've covered in my past episodes, look at the Thunder's roster. Jalen Williams, G Leaguer. Obviously not J-Dub, but Jalen Williams, G Leaguer. Alex Caruso, G Leaguer. Lou Dort, G Leaguer. Aaron Wiggins, G Leaguer. These guys are NBA players who are just waiting for opportunities to get there. A guy that Denver is going to probably target this offseason, Chris Boucher, is a former G Leaguer. I believe he was a G League MVP, if I'm not mistaken. But like I said, you look, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 26 points a game, 1.3 steals per game. You're telling me that you couldn't try to find anything out of him to get him on the NBA roster over a guy like Jalen Pickett? Now, am I saying that he should be the backup point guard? No. Am I saying that Jalen Pickett should be the backup point guard? No, because there are options out there in free agency that Denver needs to go ahead, utilize the mid-level exception, utilize the minimum contracts you can give out, the vet minimums, and go find at least a backup point guard if you're not bringing Russ back, and don't let Jalen Pickett be that too if you seriously want to make a championship push. Obviously, like I said, there's another guy who was on a two-way that I thought maybe Denver was going to use, and this is a sort of interesting move to me. Denver officially didn't bring PJ Hall back on a contract. They're officially letting him go. which I thought was interesting because I covered it during the presser of Wallace, Kroenke, and Tenzer that PJ Hall was in attendance. Now, this is a guy who thought he was going to be playing under this new management system, who waited in Denver and stayed to see what they had to say, and then they release him. So I think it's super interesting. I think that it doesn't leave a bad taste in my mouth because this is a guy who was in the G League who didn't play. Maybe they try to bring him back on a G League contract. Who knows what happens there? But Denver needs a backup big, and we all know that. So the one person I've been begging for Denver to try to bring in, obviously, is Luke Cornett. But according to Steve Bulpett, he'll probably be looking for a contract under $10 million a year, which means that Denver is not going to afford that. Realistically, unless you move on from Saric, unless you move on from Najee, unless you move on from Pickett, you're not affording that. Now, I know the Celtics are trying to move Anthony Simons to avoid to get the cap space back in order to sign Luke Cornett or re-sign Luke Cornett and give him the money he wants, which I think is super interesting because Simons, who's a 20 points per game guy, super young, has a lot of potential. You want to get rid of him to bring back Luke Cornett. But that shows you just how valuable Luke Cornett really is. You're willing to get rid of a guy who just traded for. You got rid of one of the best defensive point guards in the game for him. A guy who helped you win a championship. Has potential, is a young player, isn't making as much as Drew Holiday was. And you're going to now move on from him to bring back Luke Cornett. That says a lot about Luke Cornett, not only as a player, but as a teammate. Somebody that, like I've said, I've wanted to, have Denver try to go out and get if you're able to get him as a backup big. But I think he might be starting next year if the Celtics could actually move on from Simons. Another name that's out there that we've obviously covered, Nick Richards. They are seeking to trade him now. I believe he's on a $5 to $8 million contract. Denver's going to look to, or the Suns are going to look to get rid of that contract, try to trade him for players that they think could work. Now, the only way I think a trade for Nick Richards works is if you get rid of Julian Strawther or if you get rid of Peyton Watson, and I don't think that Denver wants to do that. That's going to be what I cover in this next topic. I think that Denver is going to want to keep that core together, and they're going to want everybody that played in the rotation last year to stay on the team, get those minutes, and you're probably going to bring in or attempt to bring in 2 or 3 guys. The last name floating around the community, which is somebody I would like, undersized big. I think I've covered him in the past as well, and that's Paul Reed, the guy who could get semi-decent minutes. Denver doesn't need him to get a lot of minutes. You probably need 8 to 10 minutes out of him a game in the playoffs, and then you could even run Gordon at the 5. You could run Duran at the 5. We all know that, but I think he's good. Like I said, Sandro Mamu is a guy who I think is so underrated, and Denver should go after. Now, like I said, they want to keep the core together, it seems. This last topic is something that was super interesting, and I want to give a little quick shout-out to Rachel Strand. She's the beat reporter on Clutch Points for Denver. I got a quick chance to talk to her. Super nice. She gave me the time of day to actually have a conversation, talk about her beliefs and what she thinks Denver is going to do, even though it's way too early in the offseason. And we strictly spoke about the starting 5, and she thinks that Denver's going to keep the core together. Now, I thought what she said was super interesting because, like I said, it was a quick conversation just about what she really wants to, or what she thinks is going to happen. She doesn't think that Gordon is going to go. Aaron Gordon obviously is not going to go anywhere, bearing anything super shocking. Obviously, something may happen, but I thought that was a little interesting because we haven't seen any or heard of any Gordon hype. Now, do I think that something's going to happen? Probably not, and I think that she's in the same boat, which is awesome. And the last thing that she said, which I also thought was interesting, is that MPJ's future is definitely in the air, and I think that's something that we all know. But she also thinks that they may hold on to him for one more season. Now, I think that's interesting because I think that every NBA or every Nuggets fan has the belief and thought that MPJ's probably gone. But maybe he's not. Maybe people have insight. Maybe people have some inside information that MPJ will be playing next to Jokic one more season. But I also wouldn't mind them waiting until the deadline to see how MPJ plays and maybe trying to dump him at the deadline for something if you can get it. At that point, you don't know what teams are rebuilding. You don't know what teams want a player that can help them get to that next level in their starting 5 for maybe some bench pieces or some picks. So let's see what happens next season, obviously. But free agency is about a day or 2 away. The time of this recording, it's 2 days away. By the time of this episode airs, it'll be a day away. And I'm excited. I won't be mad if Denver takes their time and gets the 3 right guys that fit this team. I will be mad if they are too aggressive right up front and they make moves that are stupid. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe. If you want me to cover a player, especially with free agency coming up or right before it starts, please let me know down below, and I'll catch you guys next episode.